webinar. My name is Linda Gianelli Pratt. I am very, very proud and happy to be a member of Stay Cool for Grandkids. I'm delighted that you're all here to join us for this webinar entitled Got Gas, which always makes me smile every time I think of it. I'm going to be introducing our guest speakers in a moment, but first, what we're going to do is give a little update about what Stay Cool has been up to since we had our last member meeting in November. These are the two wonderful folks who will be participating with us. Here is our agenda. We will start with an update with our member meeting, what Stay Cool has been up to. We will begin with Robert Carr, who will provide an overview and updates about building decarbonization in the San Diego region, and he'll tell you all about what's been going on with that. Tom Abram is going to give some hands-on information about how to convert your home to be all electric. And then we will take questions and answers. Before we begin, I do want to remind you that we would like you to keep your yourself on mute. If you don't keep yourself on mute, we will need to mute you because otherwise that will be distracting for us. When we get to the question and answer part, and I'll repeat this later, we'd like you to look and see if you can find the options feature down at the bottom of your phone. I'm sorry, of your computer, or the bar for the Zoom. And we'd like you to raise your hand using that feature. If you can't do that, don't worry about it. You can raise your hand and we'll call on you that way as well. And then we also invite you, if you don't want to actually say your question out loud, you're welcome to type your question in the chat. Like if you have something during one of the presentations and all of a sudden you think of a question, go ahead and type it in the chat, and that way you won't forget the question and we'll have it there available, and we will read those just to get a response from the speakers. Okay. All right. So without further ado, thank you so much for being here with us. Our Stay Cool Advisory Council consisted in November of Peg and Sue and Laura and Emily and Cliff and Robert and me. And we added some outstanding members who include Dr. Caitlin Louder, Dr. Benjamin Schliffler, Jennifer Phelps, and Kathy Nicholson. And our first ever member emeritus is Dr. David Engel, who went from being an active member of our advisory council to member emeritus, which means we can call on him when we need him for his wise advice. And you can find more about the outstanding backgrounds of all of our Stay Cool Advisory Council members at our website, staycoolforgrandkids.org, and then go to the section that says Our Team. Our youth education program is our flagship program. It's a 6th grade ocean climate science program, and nearly 3,000 students have participated since its inception. Currently, we have 13 Scripps Institution of Oceanography grad students who have been recruited to help us present the lessons in the classroom. We have some classrooms already scheduled, but if you are a middle school teacher, or if you know a middle school teacher, please contact us if you would like to be considered to be put on the list for a presentation. We hope to schedule them throughout April and the first part of May. Again, this is our email address, sdstaycool4grandkids@gmail.com. Call to action. That's one of the things we like to do at Stay Cool. Our whole purpose is to educate, inform, and engage people in San Diego, especially people who may not typically think about climate impacts, and help them learn more about the issues so that they can be informed folks who will come and talk to city council members, county board of supervisors, who will help us write letters, and who will respond in some way to some of our action alerts. So a couple of things that have happened since November is that we sent a letter to the city of San Diego, commenting on their Climate Resilient San Diego plan, and actually commending them on the fact that they updated their the general plan safety element, which a lot of cities have not yet done. And this is very important as we move forward and look at new development coming to our region, making sure that that these developments are not in wildfire areas, making sure that these developments actually are more closer to where we have all of our infrastructure, rather than having to build further and further out away from the city. Our regional transportation plan that Sandag developed, we also wrote a letter in December, and we recommended that Sandag approve the staff's draft of the 2021 regional plan. The board did end up approving it, which is great. Still a lot of work to do on that, but that is something that's in progress. And then we sent action alerts about net energy metering, a concern that a number of folks have about utilities trying to perhaps financially harm those who have solar power on their homes already. This was taken up at the California Public, will be taken up at the California Public Utilities Commission. It was scheduled earlier this year, and I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure if it actually went forward yet or not, if the commission voted on it. We'll have, I'm sure one of our energy speakers will know about that one. And then we also wrote, we also sent an action alert about the De Anza natural proposal that we hope the city of San Diego will consider, that will help us restore the wetlands. And we had 2 messages about Giving Tuesday, and we sent out a January newsletter, and our April newsletter is due to come out next week.
Linda, your mic is doing some funny things. Is it scratching something or moving?
No, it was an airplane.
No. Oh.
Thank you. All right, and we're about to launch our book club. Stay Cool finally has our book club ready to go. We are reading currently the book Braiding Sweetgrass, and we have a date to discuss this, April 28th from 7 to 8 p.m. Our book club is going to happen every other month because we all are busy and we wanted to make sure folks had time to read. And if you are interested still in joining our book club, you can send us a message at sdstaycoolforgrandkids@gmail.com, and you will be sent the link to participate. Again, the book is Braiding Sweetgrass. The next month, Cliff is leading this one, Cliff from our advisory council. Our next book will be the responsibility of whoever else takes the lead. And then we'll have that meeting not in May, but in June, again, allowing 2 months. So we hope that folks will participate with this. All right. So if you have questions about our member meeting, please type them in the chat or remember them at the end of this meeting so that you can ask it. Whoops, went too far. Sorry. All right. And with no further ado, I am going to introduce both of our speakers. When Robert gets done, then we'll switch over to Tom. Robert is going to again give the big picture about why it's so important to think about building electrification in our residential and commercial buildings. And then Tom's going to tell you what he did to convert his house to all electric, and also using renewable energy. All right, Tom.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Go. Please let me know if everyone can see it. Okay, a thumbs up. All right, thank you. Great. Well, sorry, let me go back. Really great to be here. Good evening. It's great to present to one of our core members at the San Diego Building Electrification Coalition. I think you're one of our original members. We've been a coalition since November 2020, when a group of SD350 volunteers kind of started this push, and it's grown and grown and keeps on growing. We keep on getting new members, and it's just great to have folks like yourselves as a member of this coalition kind of trying to advocate for building electrification in our region, in your cities and your neighborhoods. So really great to be here. And let me see, where is Stay Cool? Stay Cool's right there. All right. All right, so the goals, there's several goals of the coalition that we have, and it's accelerating building electrification through different ways. We're trying to, at one level, trying to advocate for the adoption of REACH codes or building electrification ordinances that basically will stop putting natural gas inside our buildings for new construction. And then, we'll talk more about kind of how does that work with buildings that already exist. We're also trying to make sure that when this is done, the equity piece is really considered. Communities of concern are really impacted by the unhealthy habits of burning fossil fuels in our societies. And usually when we have fixes for these, usually the communities concerned are last to benefit from it. So we're really trying to advocate that these communities actually are the first to benefit from it, and basically don't get left behind. And then we provide education and outreach to basically support this effort. And this is an example of that, is when we do presentations to kind of, I think once community members become educated, one of the things we're going to talk about today is like what you can do as individuals, as organizations, as community members to help this fight and move it forward. So essentially, why is it so important to eliminate fossil fuels from the buildings that we live and work in? Well, we all know there's a serious climate crisis. The IPCC report was even more grim than the previous one. Everything I read is that we need to be, our emissions need to be down to zero by 2030, if not sooner. That's a really tall order, and so we can't do that without eliminating fossil fuels and natural gas, methane gas from our buildings. And also, there's just a danger of having and using natural gas in buildings. You have to extract it, transport it, store it, and then burn it. And all those things have dangers. So, for instance, gas lines, where we live in earthquake country, you get an earthquake, you have an ignition source, you got a big boom, and a lot of damage. On the right-hand side, you'll see here at Aliso Canyon, years back in 2015, there was this huge release of leak of methane gas in the atmosphere and surrounding areas. The neighborhoods had to basically be evacuated because they're being poisoned, and then just tons and tons and tons of a really potent greenhouse gas, methane gas, in the atmosphere, basically compounding, essentially greenhouse gas emissions. So that's not so good. California, unfortunately, uses lots of natural gas in their buildings. We are number 2. So we have to do our part. This has been years in the making. The utilities and the gas companies have been basically making huge campaigns to promote the use of natural gas over the past decades, and we're now paying the price. It's going to be a tall order to do this. So what does building electrification look like? And we're mainly talking about residential spaces right now. So it's basically anything in your home or building or office, what have you, that use natural gas. All right. So in residential settings, for the most part, predominantly it's water heating and space heating. All right. So we use natural gas to heat the water, and we use natural gas to heat the air. And then this, coming in third is basically gas stoves. Everyone loves their gas stoves. We're cooking with gas. We all know that campaign. And then there's some, pools and spas and so forth are all a part of it. So electrification is taking these appliances that use natural gas and replace them with electric equivalents. And, basically, every single electrical option is better than the gas option. And we'll kind of, Tom is really going to go into that, why that is. And so I'm just going to leave it here because Tom's really going to take a deep dive into how, why this is all true. Although, cooking with gas doesn't use as much gas as, space heating and water heating, it has its own hazards. When you combust a fossil fuel, you get nitric oxides, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, particulate matter. And if you don't vent those properly, they can cause harm to the occupants of the building, so it's found that the increase of asthma with, the use of, natural gas in homes is quite prevalent. And so if you do have a natural gas stove, but please use that vent above your stove, because that is the only way to get those pollutants out without harming you. And unfortunately, there are people who have gas stoves that don't have vents for whatever reason, or they don't use them. So it's really, really important. There's like, blood pressure, increased blood pressure, heart disease, and so forth. They're all linked to it. So it's not good to have people burning stuff inside buildings. In case there's plenty of articles about this, including this one from the New York Times. Basically, they're saying that even when your stove is turned off, it can still be emitting unburnt methane gas because it just, it's a leaky gas. It just, there's all kinds of seepage that comes from the natural gas infrastructure, including that's in your home. So, if you get a chance, read this article. It's quite shocking. So what we're trying to do is in the near term, is to advocate for building electrification ordinances, mainly dealing with new construction. So they basically say that any new building that's built, it will be all electric. And then we're also, that includes, major additions and alterations as well. So what we're trying to do is stop the natural gas infrastructure in its tracks, so that no more existing infrastructure is built, because that'll be in the loop for a really long period of time, and we can't have that. And then what that does is it allows, people who, manufacture, install, service these new technologies such as heat pumps to really gain expertise and really kind of get to like it. And once that becomes the norm, once we take technology to become the norm, then, when we go into retrofit existing buildings, there are going to be a lot of people who are just really confident and competent in installing and, basically installing and servicing these technologies. So, then we're asking municipalities such as San Diego or the county to decarbonize their buildings, all right, because they own a lot of real estate. And if they can show the way and kind of lead by example, that'll go a long way to kind of help, again, just, accelerate this transition into all electric buildings. And then the last but big piece that Tom is really actually going to talk about, as a good example of it, is how do we decarbonize the buildings that already are in place, the existing building stock that already have gas infrastructure in it. How do we do that at scale that's equitable, so that everyone, who basically needs this transition can do it regardless of where they live and kind of, what their income level is. So again, this is the community concern piece. A lot of times, for instance, when we have, fixes of these types, communities concerned are not always taken in and put in the center what they need to be, because they are unfortunately adversely affected by all of this more than the rest of us. I mean, for instance, if you think of people who are in Barrio Logan or who are in National City, they're right next to the port, and there's all kinds of, diesel and natural gas and all kinds of pollutants that are emitted because they happen to be around these areas. And so we're really trying to make these things, clean the air around them and give them ways to electrify themselves and have, cleaner air. So we're reaching out to these communities concerned. We're trying to basically get them to advocate for all electric buildings as well. So that equity piece is basically front and center for what we do. So a couple examples of some ordinances that have already been passed here in San Diego County. Encinitas and Solana Beach. There's been a lot of ordinances that have been passed in Northern California and kind of further down, like in LA. And so San Diego's kind of, finally getting up to speed and kind of getting this ball rolling. So this building ordinance was unanimously approved. So all new construction, regardless of type of building, will have no gas infrastructure. That includes commercial, residential, single family, ADUs, multifamily. And they also must have EV ready circuits installed. And then for multifamily, they actually have to install EV chargers in hotels and non-residential. At first, it had some considerable exemptions, but with a lot of hard work and advocacy, those restrictions were minimized to just restaurants that needed to have that required gas cooking, although that's not completely true, but that was an exemption. And then emergency buildings. So. And then Solana Beach followed suit in December of last year. And so basically they're requiring that all space heating and water heating and clothes drying be done with, basically heat pumps. And they allowed gas stoves, but if you think about it, if you're gonna do all this electrification, you might as well just do the stove as well. You need to have solar PV, all building types. And then also what's really cool about this is major renovations were included in the ordinance. So, depending on the threshold, residential, 50% of the structural components or over 700 square feet of addition, you had to go and, basically electrify that space. So really, really cool. There's lots in the works that, different stages of different ordinances, because a lot of regions are putting this in their climate action plans. But this pace at which climate action plans actually get implemented can be slow. But if you pass an ordinance and go above and beyond the current energy codes, that happens faster. So that's what we're encouraging. So the coalition itself is we're talking with the County of San Diego, the City of San Diego, Chula Vista, La Mesa, National City, San Marcos, Escondido, Carlsbad, Santee, and Del Mar. So all of these municipalities, we've talked to one or two or more of their council persons or their mayors, staff, to kind of introduce building electrification, kind of inquire how it's going, what we can do to assist, and really try to encourage them to think about, some sort of ordinance that's all electric. So one thing that Linda wanted me to say is, like, what can stateful members do? Well, you can do exactly what we're doing, which is going, if you know elected officials, talk to them, write them letters, make phone calls, meet with them. Just be persistent, because they got to be hearing this over and over again for them to think that it's ready for them to do. Join our mailing list. There's there's no nothing, cost, nothing. Just join the mailing list and you'll get up to date on all things building electrification here in San Diego and beyond. And also use your social networks to advocate for building electrification. So every time you see some cool thing about building electrification, just retweet it, repost it, kind of amplify it. That's really, really something you could do. So I encourage you to do that. And then, as an individual, you can do what Tom's going to tell you about, which is electrify your own home. If you're basically a water heater, the shelf life of a water heater is 10 years. All right. Well, when it's getting ready, do you think it's, say it's water heater's 8 years old, start thinking about how you can install a heat pump for heat pump water heaters. Or if your AC system's kind of getting old, try to find a way to get those, basically heat pump to replace your old HVAC system. And right now there's some incredible rebates out there through the Tech Clean California program. You can get a heat pump water heater and you get a $3,100 rebate on that. So that makes it much more reasonable to do. Same thing with a heat pump HVAC system. So, and then also visit the switches on for incentives and to find a contractor if you want to do this, and also a lot of other information about building electrification. Because again, heating water and heating the space is really where we use our gas. And then, also consider using, an induction cooktop. There is a free induction cooktop loaner program through the SDGBC called eCooktop. I'll get the website and I'll put it in the chat when I'm done, but you can definitely test one out for free and see how cool they are. If you are willing or wanting to electrify your home, the SDBC has a basically a technical assistance questionnaire. You go in there and say, I'm trying to do this and I have a question about it. Some of our volunteers will respond with you and kind of give you some tips and tricks and assist you in what you're doing. Visit our website, and then also please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, because we're always tweeting new stuff for that. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of this webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and give it back to you, Linda.
All right. Linda, you want me to just jump in here?
Yes, absolutely. You did it perfectly.
All right. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of how we can go ahead and electrify our homes. So I'll start with a technology overview, so a little bit of information about the specific technologies that we're talking about when we're talking about electrification. Talk about how solar and storage interplay with electrification. I'll talk about a case study of my home, and we'll talk about incentives as well as how you can go ahead and start your journey on electrification. So first of all, for space heating, the primary technology we're going to use, especially here in San Diego, is going to be what's called an air source heat pump. So what we're doing is using these heat pumps to move heat from the outside to the inside. So they are air conditioners that run in reverse. So a lot of people have air conditioners that just work one way, and heat pumps just reverse the flow of the refrigerant and allow you to heat your home as well. They're effectively 250 to 400% efficient. It takes 1 unit of electricity can move 2, 3, 4 units of heat. So whereas a natural gas device is going to be limited to maybe 96% efficient, and even electric resistance will be limited to 100%. So for existing heating systems, you might have a centralized system. If you have gas, it could be a central furnace with an integrated air handler that blows the hot air throughout ductwork within your home, or you could have distributed. So it could be wall furnaces or baseboards or even mini splits. And then this would be either paired with air conditioning or not. So typically from a cost perspective, maintaining that same distribution system is going to have the same lowest upfront cost. So if you already have central heat, then it's typically going to be less expensive just to replace that unit if you have an air conditioner, for example, replace it with one that can do heating as well. But it is less efficient to use these centralized systems. You have losses in the ductwork, and then you also have the units just tend to be less efficient. So what does it look like? If you squint, and even if you don't, they really look exactly the same from a centralized approach. So several of you probably already have systems like this on the air conditioning side. And a lot of times we think about when we're replacing our heat, we need to think about electrifying, but really if you're replacing air conditioner, all you need to do is replace it with one that where the refrigerant goes backwards and you're good to go. In terms of if you have distributed units, they do have the most efficient option are these ductless mini splits. So lots of manufacturers make them: Fujitsu, Mitsubishi, LG, lots of different manufacturers, and these are very efficient, a lot more efficient than the centralized systems. There are also what are called through-the-wall heat pumps or window heat pumps, which are going to be less efficient, but there might be a good application if you have limited use of kind of hard to reach areas, for example. For water heating, we again are looking to heat pumps. So heat pump water heaters are very similar, but instead of taking the heat from the outside and rejecting it indoors, what we're doing is we're taking the heat that's in the air and we're extracting that heat and sending it to our domestic water, to our hot water heater. Most of these units do have backup electric resistance as well. That's when you see a hybrid electric heat pump, hybrid heat pump water heater. The hybrid element, it means it's a heat pump and it's electric resistance. The current units are 240 volts. So if you already have a gas unit, you probably don't have 240 service right there for that water heater. But they do have 120 volt units that are coming out this year. So look out for those. There are some space requirements that you have to consider for these. So if you think about it, a lot of if you've got this in like a small closet, it's going to be trying to suck all that heat out from within the closet, and that closet's going to get cool, and it's going to have a hard time extracting any more heat from that closet. So it needs to be well ventilated. There are some ducting options available. That's what we ended up doing at our home. We have an outdoor water heater shed, and basically crammed it in there, and we're ducting that cool air out from that water heater. Electric tankless is another option. It does require a lot of power at one time. So it requires a lot of current, a lot of amperage to make that hot water. So it could be, if a lot of people have 100 amp panels, or, you might have 200 amp panels. A lot of these tankless units could be 50, 60, up to 100 amps just for that device alone, because it's trying to just ramp up that heat right away. And at the end of the day, it's actually less efficient, even though it's instantaneous. The fact that you've got a 3-to-1 ratio, basically 300% efficient heat pumps versus with some standby losses versus 100% instantaneous tankless. The heat pump water heaters tend to be the way to go. You could also have grid service and energy storage associated with this, either integrated to the unit, or there are some workarounds where you can basically control the unit to turn it off and on when it's most advantageous from a grid perspective. The electric cooking kind of has a bad rap. I think a lot of people think about the old school electric coils, electric resistance coils that are kind of the traditional electric cooking that most people have experienced. But electric induction has a lot of advantages over both electric resistance and natural gas. So with electric induction, you are heating the cookware directly. So it's generating magnetic fields, which are then heating up the cookware. If you remove your cookware, then it doesn't add any more heat. So the cooktop starts to cool down. You get really good control. It's a lot quicker to heat up as well and easier to clean. There's actually a pretty cool video out there where somebody puts a towel on top of their cooktop and then puts their pan on top. If they're making like a messy sauce or something, and then it still works. And then you take the pot off, you have a sauce all over your towel, you just toss it in your washer and you're good to go. So it's very safe, great for the grandkids for sure. And it works with most cookware. So that's really the one thing where it's a little bit of a disadvantage is it's not going to work with every single piece of cookware. It works especially well with cast iron, with most stainless steel, with enameled cast iron. There are also these induction discs, which is just a piece of magnetic metal that you could put between the cooktop and any other any cookware, and it makes it work. The only challenge is you are going to lose some efficiency with that, but it'll work. If you have a classic piece of cookware in your collection that you want to keep using, you can. So as Robert mentioned, we have through the San Diego Green Building Council an electric home cooktop program where you could borrow one of these plug-in units for about 3 weeks and see if you like it. Definitely encourage you to do so if you haven't cooked with induction before. That's really great. In terms of dryers, there are a few options. Kind of the standard one are these electric resistance vented dryers. These are typically 240 volts, so you probably need to, if you have a gas dryer, probably need to run a circuit to that device. There are some smaller models available at 120 volts. Make it a little bit easier. They are the most energy intensive of the dryer options, although they do tend to be faster. So I know for us, we ended up going with electric resistance just because we have a lot of laundry throughput with 2 kids, 2 small kids. So We did end up going with the electric resistance, and all that means is we have a little bit more solar generation that we needed to be able to meet our needs. There are also some ventless options. So there's condensing dryers, which are very popular in Europe. They're more energy efficient. One cool thing about this is that you can get combined washer and dryer units. So you could have one unit where you toss your clothes in, it washes it, it dries it, and you're good. So, one thought might be, instead of having a washer and a dryer, you might have two of these combined units if you need additional capacity, or you just have one. Although they do take a few hours to run through their cycle. And then finally, we've got our friend the heat pump is back. Again, for the heat pump dryers, they're typically 240 volts. They are the most energy efficient option. And there are more options coming out to the market. So one of the key elements to all of this is the electrical panel. So everything that we talked about is adding a new electric load where there wasn't one before. So you're often adding more circuits, especially if you're considering putting in electric vehicle charger. So we really want to look at that panel board that's taking in that utility power and then distributing it throughout the house. So you want to think about how much current can I add to the system, and then just the physical space. How do I fit those breakers within the panel? There are some strategies to be able to avoid a panel upgrade. If you have a 200 amp panel, you should be fine. There should certainly be a way for you to electrify with your existing panel. If you have a 100 amp panel, it may be possible as well. You'll have to strategize a bit more, but there are some ways to do that as well. Some of the things you could do is make sure you're picking high efficiency equipment. So if you're looking at adding space heating, you need a certain amount of heating. We talk about heating in, we talk about it in tons typically for AC heat pump units. If you need 3 tons, then the higher SEER or more efficient unit you get, the less electricity it's going to need. So that might be one thing to look at. Anytime you could combine units, so washer dryer or range versus a separate cooktop and oven, right sizing your HVAC. So maybe you don't need 3 tons. Maybe you put in insulation, or maybe you had a 5-ton unit. You put in a bunch of insulation and you don't need that much anymore. You could downsize to a smaller unit. You could look at these circuit sharing plugs, are pretty neat. This is a split volt. Basically, it's like a power strip for 240 volt equipment, and it can switch between 2 devices. You prioritize it, say, hey, when I'm running my dryer, I need my dryer running. But then once the dryer stops, the electric vehicle charger will start charging again. So this is great if you have, for example, laundry in the garage. And then tandem breakers are a good way to be able to fit a bit more breakers into an existing panel. There are some tools available. There's a watt diet calculator that's out there that Tom Cabot up in the Bay Area has put together to help you to identify whether you need an upgrade or not. One thing that really pulls all of this together in San Diego, especially with our electric rates, is solar. So with electrification, that expands your ability to cover your energy, your utility costs with solar PV. You can't do that with gas. It really improves the economics of electrification when you pair, I run the numbers and I look at, replacing our water heater, gas to electric with and without the solar panels. The solar panels really, carry it. So it's really important if you're being cost conscious and also environmentally to pair it with solar. One thing people ask about is, what about solar thermal? Solar thermal absolutely has applications, especially for pool heating. But what happens when you pair solar PV with a heat pump that has that efficiency, let's say of 300%, it ends up beating solar thermal and ends up being actually in many ways easier to operate because you don't need a backup system for typical water heating. There's still the favorable net energy metering rules, as Linda pointed out. There is a threat there, but there was a lot of pushback, and so they're kind of back to the drawing board. So we'll see what happens there, but it can't be better than what we've got now. And then consider adding storage for deeper carbon reductions. A lot of times when we're pushing extra power to the grid, we're pushing it out when the grid is clean, and then we're pulling electricity back when the grid is dirtier. So with storage, you can shift when you're using electricity and push it to the grid when it's dirtier to offset those emissions, and then pull it from the grid when it's cleaner. Just an overview of our home. This is it's now all electric. It's located in El Cerrito by San Diego State. It's about 1,500 square foot, built in 1949, and there was a major remodel right before we moved in 2015. So we moved in. Look at that lawn in the middle of the last drought. That was one of the first things to go. Right before that, we did end up putting in our heat pump and air conditioner. We had an existing furnace. It was new, I believe. It was advertised with air conditioning, didn't have it, and we a little warm here, so we ended up putting that in, and definitely made the choice to put in a heat pump. We did keep the central distribution system. It just seemed to make sense at the time from a cost perspective, first cost. And then solar is so much more affordable these days. It just means a few more solar panels. So this is our initial solar array, just over 3 kilowatts. So that solar array powered all of our typical electric needs, as well as our space heating. So we were net zero. And then we got our plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. We got a portable induction cooktop. We cooked on this for a couple years as our basically main cooking source, and until it made sense for us to upgrade to the full thing. Put in a level 2 EV charger to make sure that we were getting this thing charged and keeping it on electric as much as possible. Got a second electric vehicle, used Leaf in 2020. Put in our heat pump water heater. You'll see this kind of wacky little duct here. That's actually the cool air coming off of that heat pump. And I have it ducted into our house through the attic and into the kitchen. And so we get free cooling from that unit. And when we don't want it, I can close the vent and it rejects that cool air to the attic. Then we put in a solar expansion to cover all our electric needs, anticipated needs from these changes, as well as the last few bits that needed to be electrified, the induction range and the dryer. And then we had SDG&E come and shut the gas off in December of 2020. So this is kind of had done some calculations to identify how many solar panels we needed for each of these electrification items. Our initial installation was just over 3 kW. Expansion was a little bit more than that. We needed about 2 solar panels for our space heating, about 2 for our water heaters, about 1.5 for our cooking and drying, and then, gosh, I'm trying to remember how many this is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6.5 for the EVs. Obviously, that's going to depend on electric vehicle type and how often you drive. Some of the things we learned, we tried to plan for expanding this solar array by planning for a larger inverter. So, I mean, we didn't have to replace the inverter, so that was nice. We did end up with several panels on the east side, however, which is less efficient. But we probably would have picked the even more efficient panels if I could have gone back to save some more room on the south and west sides. Some other lessons: upsize the conduit. So if you're planning to add solar in the future, make sure that the conduit that's going to hold those wires are upsized as well. There are some new electrification incentives available. So there's a tech program, which is really the predominant one. That's where you're going to get most of your money from most of your conversions. And then there's also the Energy Smart Homes under their alteration program. So for space heating, for the central heat, if you're using a central heat pump, the tech program, I think I've got these mixed up. I must have these mixed up. For both the central and the split, you're going to get $3,000 per unit, up to 2 units. So if you have a split unit, if you get 2 splits to heat and cool your home, you can actually get $6,000 for your space heating. And then the Energy Smart Homes, it's $90 a ton. And then for the mini split, you get $325 a ton. You might have a 3-ton unit, so you might get $1,000 or so for the mini splits. So not quite as lucrative as the tech program, but definitely every little bit helps. And then on the heat pump water heater, you get $3,100 for the tech program going from gas to electric. If you have an electric resistance water heater, you can also get $1,000 to convert that. And then the Energy Smart Homes has $450 per unit. Heat pump dryer, you can get $500 per unit through the Energy Smart Homes. Fortunately, there's no incentives available for induction cooktop or panel upgrades at this time. You could go to see the tech approved contractor list here at the Switches On website. In terms of starting your journey, I think a nice first step is to electrify on the cheap, try out this portable induction cooktop. And if you aren't able to, if you like it and you're not able to upgrade to the full thing, just buy a portable. They're maybe $50, $60. You can try it out and use it as your primary cooking source for a while. I think a good idea is to gather info on your water heater, your HVAC equipment, your appliances. How old are they? What are the size? What's the tonnage? For example, what are the gallons? And then with that, you can identify the solution for each device replacement. So do you want to continue with the central heating? Do you want to switch over to mini splits? And then coordinate your electric panel needs with an electric contractor. Let them know all of the things that you're planning to do. That's one thing I wish I'd done a little better is instead of piecemeal, oh, we're going to do this, now we're going to do this. Just let them know, hey, we're going to do A, B, and C. Make sure that that's all planned out. Size your solar with the future needs in mind. You can get some no-cost help through this our website through the SDBEC, Help Me Electrify. Gather bids with tech contractors. And then an idea that we've been kind of kicking around is decarbonization circles. Basically, how can we electrify together? So if you get a group of 4 or 5 people, study group, hey, let's look at our homes together, move forward on this journey together. I think that could be really powerful. So we're kind of playing around with what that might look like. And then the last step is to turn off the gas. All right, so thanks again, and I'm here to answer any questions y'all might have.
That was great. Thank you. Both our speakers did an outstanding job, and I am applauding them wildly, and I know that you are too. What I'd like to do now is I am going to, sorry, could you stop sharing your screen for a second, Tom? Yes, there we go. There we go. Okay, whoops. Sorry. Okay. So this is a great part, question and answer. If you look on your bar down at the bottom or the top or the side, I'm not sure where it is on yours, there's a little button that says reactions. It's a circle, and I think it's 2 eyes and a smile. And I am going to raise my hand. That's the option down at the bottom. Look, I raised my hand. And then that keeps the questions in order for us. If you can't do that, that's fine. But we are going to first look at the questions that have already been asked via the chat. And then we're going to take questions from the audience. So think about your questions and get ready to raise your hand. And Sarah, I think you're going to help me call on people in order. Is that correct?
I'm happy to do that. And your first question is from John Knox in the chat box.
Thank you.
Great. So it looks like John is asking whether there are incentives available for replacing gas stoves with induction cooktops or for going from a gas clothes dryer to an electric heat pump dryer. The good news is there is that incentive available going from your gas clothes dryer to your electric heat pump dryer through the Energy Smart Homes program. It's $500 a unit. In that program, you submit the paperwork yourself as opposed to the contractor, but you want to make sure you get pre-approval, et cetera. But that'll pay for a good chunk of that dryer, especially if you're already in the market for one. But nothing for the cooktop yet.
Thank you.
And it
More
looks like
questions?
Dennis
Okay.
is our next on the lineup. Dennis, if you want to unmute yourself, please ask your question out loud.
That will help. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to know if you're aware of a company named Span. They have an intelligent electrical panel that I think has a lot of potential.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I think it's pretty interesting, especially when we look at using backup storage units, because you can shut off the breakers automatically. I think the only my only question about it is that it's pretty expensive just from a cost perspective. I think they're a few thousand. So if it depends on what you're looking for, if you're trying to really understand what's happening in your home where your energy is being used, there is another product called Sense that it doesn't have as many features. You can't control the breakers, for example. But what is interesting about it is it can do disaggregation. It can analyze where your energy is being used, even though it's not like literally metering each individual circuit. They have some algorithms that they're able to use to identify how the energy is being used. But it'll be interesting to see if Span can, as they get more units out, reduce their costs, because I find that one to be pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I think one advantage there is if you have to upgrade your service panel anyway, it's worthwhile considering. And then you may not have to do a service upgrade either. I mean, you may get by with 150 amp service rather than upgrading to a 200.
Yeah, I mean, if you can help avoid getting a service, definitely. Even it might end up even being even more cost effective.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go to Sharon next in the chat, who has a question about getting a new water heater, and they're getting solar panels.
Great. Yeah. So I would say, I mean, for the water heater, it tends to be most cost effective to put your water heater where it already is, because you've got the water plumb to it, and you've got a location for it. One challenge is to just make sure there's enough space. You want to make sure that it meets the manufacturer's recommendations. In San Diego, there's a lot of these water heaters in closets. I will note these outdoor sheds. I've had mine in the outdoor shed for a couple years, and it's worked fine, no issues. So there are ways to make it work. But yeah, definitely, check with a contractor, find out where it is, and you're glad to, if you drop a line in the bit.ly/helpmeelectrify link, we can definitely chat a little bit more about what your options are. In terms of solar panels, you want to generally put them on your south side of your roof. That's going to be where you're going to generate the most electricity. Second best tends to be the west. You generate more on the west than the east, just because there's less cloud cover. And then you're generating it at a time where we really need that electricity, and the grid needs that electricity.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Let's go with Caitlin, who has her hand raised.
Thank you so much. This was a really great presentation from you both, and I learned a lot. Here in San Diego, we have a lot of single family homes, but also a lot of high density housing. So I was curious if you know of any resources for those of us in condos who have to convince our HOA to allow us to make changes like adding solar panels, or for renters to ask their landlords. Are there these sorts of places for educational materials to make that case to others who may decide on some of these upgrades?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I don't know if there's any kind of comprehensive, like 1-pager, 2-pager to help with this. There are some good resources available and some good strategies out there. I think one is for solar, definitely what's called virtual net metering, because you could put one large solar array on the roof and it can tie to a central panel, and then you just have to submit paperwork to say, SDG&E, we want, if there's, let's say 10 units, you can say, I want 10% of the solar to go to each unit. The neat thing about it, especially if you're in a condo and you're in an HOA, not everybody has to sign up for it. You can have everybody, you can say, there's 10 units and only 5 people want to participate. those 5 people can pay for the solar installation and reap the benefits. So you don't need to get everybody on board. You do need to get, the HOA overall or the landlord to agree to the system. And then I did focus entirely on single families from the incentives program, but there are multifamily incentives available through both of these. I believe both of these programs, definitely tech, which is the more lucrative one. So that's the one that matters the most from a financial perspective. So there are a lot of incentives available for multifamily, but definitely a good point. It'd be nice if we had this all in one, and maybe that's something that we can work on too. Hope
I
that helped a bit.
might add to that the Center for Sustainable Energy is a great clearinghouse for a lot of this information. And I'm going to put the link for how you can get a hold of them into the chat for everyone. So it's the Center for Sustainable Energy.
Great. And
Here
then
in San
Tom,
Diego.
if you could put your bit.ly link in the chat box, that would be great as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So it looks like we have Peggy Engel next with a question. And then we'll go to John.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering when Robert mentioned the communities of concern, and I really appreciate that the coalition is sensitive to that, but it also made me wonder about, there seems to be a broad official understanding and concern associating childhood asthma rates with neighborhood air pollution. And I'm just wondering, have you seen literature, or are you aware of organizations that are recognizing this risk of older home gas infrastructure as a contributing factor in some of those neighborhoods?
There's definitely been research that has shown that this is pretty clear. And on top of my head, I'm sorry, I can't come with that, but there's definitely community-based organizations who are in, the areas that we're talking about in Southwest San Diego and so forth. Because obviously the port, emits a lot of pollution, because their activities, diesel mostly, a lot of the trucks that leave the port go right through those neighborhoods to the freeway. So you get a lot of that particulate matter. So there's lots of, and there's one organization for sure that I'm just blanking on. Tom, jump in if you can remember. They were going to be a coalition member, but they didn't make it.
It's the Environmental Health Coalition.
Yes, thank you, Linda. Yeah, so I mean, so the evidence is out there; it's clear. And so, one thing the port is doing to their, that you can give them, some credit for, is that they're electrifying their truck fleets to move all the cargo around the terminal and stuff like that. They're electrifying that. There's a lot more to do. I mean, they're trying to make sure these cruise ships, when they come in, that they're basically plugging in the shore power, things like that. So, and if you can somehow eventually electrify all these trucks that are driving through these neighborhoods or reroute them, what have you, it's really important. So there's definitely, people know what's causing the issue. They know it causes bad health symptoms, and they know what the solution is. It's just that, I think now the electeds are really starting to understand that it's on everyone's mind, and it's the right thing to do. So I hope that answered your question.
Right, and we'll go with John Knox, and I think this will be the last question, and then we'll have Linda wrap up.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And Linda, thank you for providing this forum tonight. I'm so glad that I attended. It's been very informative, and I look forward to following up with both Tom and Robert later. Tom, I wanted to say I'm really impressed with what you've done with your home. I've done some of those things, maybe about half of what you've done. I've got the solar, got an EV, I got a heat pump water heater installed in 2018. Back then, the incentive was $250, I think, from SDG&E. And that chart you showed is amazing, how now it's $3,000 plus to switch out your water heater. And as I recall, when I did that, when you finished paying the plumber to take out the old one and install the new one, you had to pay the cost of the new water heater. And then you got to pay an electrician to run the line and do all that. That came to be around $2,000. Was that $3,000 would have covered everything as far as that goes. I'm just curious about, I have no idea. One thing I do want to do is the heat pump HVAC system. I have no idea what the cost of that might be. I noticed there's a $3,000 incentive plus the $90 per ton, which I don't understand. I'm just wondering how much of the total cost would be covered through these incentives. Sounds like a heat pump water heater is going to cover all of your costs. From my experience, I'm just wondering about the HVAC system. How does that compare in terms of the cost?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, John. And I think for a lot of people, that $3,000 can pay for your entire water heater installation. It really does depend a bit on if you got a trickier location, you have to run ducting, et cetera. But yeah, I think a lot of people could get all or most of it covered. For the space heating heat pump water heat, or the space heating heat pumps, again, that does depend on the location. And whether you're going for central or mini splits. If you don't have, I mean, if you've got older ductwork, older central system, then you're gonna have to do a bunch of work up there anyway. It might be time to be really looking at mini splits anyway. My parents just put in 2 mini splits. They were able to take advantage of the program. I believe theirs was a pretty easy installation, and it came to about $7,500 for the 2 mini splits. So I think it ended up at $6,000. They were able to, I think it ended up being about $1,500 for the installation post incentive. But depending on the contractor you go with, you could certainly, get most of it covered, especially with the mini splits. And then, by the way, for the tonnage, ton is just the way that the size from a usually from a cooling perspective, how much cooling, and really it's the unit ton actually is it's the amount of energy it takes to basically freeze or melt a ton of ice. So that's where that unit comes from. So most homes might be, it could be around 3 tons, 4 tons is kind of about the size of a typical residential system, just to give you some perspective. And then, yeah, I do notice in terms of heat, I don't notice a lot of heat. Ours is outdoors. It's on the other side of we're pretty close to our master bedroom. There is some noise for sure, but I haven't found it to be too loud. And then one last thought I saw on was the question about the HOAs, apartments, et cetera. I mean, being able to talk with them about these incentives and say, we have thousands of dollars of incentives available. It can pay for equipment that you need to replace anyway. I think it really lends to, a lot of times I like to think about kind of grace, when do we plan? When do you think the water heater might die? The furnace might, plan out for that. But right now, these incentives aren't going to be around forever. So it's a good time to really plan for it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right. We are at 7:34. We like to be punctual, starting on time and ending on time, because we promised you a 1-hour webinar. This was wonderful. And again, thank you to all of our wonderful speakers, to both of you. I appreciate it so much, Robert and Tom. And thank you to all who asked the questions, because I think we all learned from them. What we are going to do at Stay Cool is, because this is a recorded conversation, we will be posting it to our website. We'll be posting the link on our website to how you can see it on our YouTube channel, because once again, we are very cool and we have a YouTube channel with our Stay Cool information. So we will also be following up with some information from the chat. And if there is anything else that anyone has questions about, you are always, always welcome to email us at our email address, which was listed above. And I'm going to end with one last slide that gives you more information for joining us. And I want to thank you so much for participating, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. at our next wonderful webinar, which will be in April, and I don't think we have a date yet, but look for more information about that coming up soon. It's going to be fabulous. I'm just going to leave you in suspense right now. We'll tell you more later. All right. So at this point, thank you. And we will see you again next time. Stay cool for grandkids. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.